What up guys? This episode is all about creatine and protein powder. We're gonna dive deep into what creatine is, how creatine works, also what protein powder is it safe? This is a great podcast to show anybody who is like, oh, don't take creatine, it might make you go bald or it damages your kidneys, or you don't need protein powder, there's no use for protein powder. This is an episode that dives into everything about creatine and protein powder. I'm doing this because these are common questions I get asked. Should I take creatine? Should I take protein powder? I think this podcast will dive very in depth, but it will also answer those questions. So let's dive in. We're gonna start out with creatine. There's so many myths about creatine that I hear. It's insane. It's just one of those supplements that became very popular, and it's actually the most researched supplement, maybe behind vitamin D and vitamin C. But yet we still see myths about it. It'll make you bloated. You don't need creatine. It's bad for your kidneys. It'll make your hair fall out. It doesn't work. This other form of creatine is better than creatine monohydrate. We're gonna find out if any of that is true. And to do that, we need to start with what is creatine. So creatine is an amino acid, and it's located mostly in your body's muscles as well as your brain, but it's located in all of your organs. This isn't just some thing that's in your muscles. It's located in all your organs, your brain, your liver, your kidney, your skin, which is your body's largest organ. Creatine is involved in almost everything. Most people will get creatine through eating seafood and red meat and eggs. If you're eating seafood, red meat, or eggs, you are ingesting creatine. You're probably just getting about 1 gram, maybe 2 grams if you eat a lot of meat per day. So you're ingesting creatine. Obviously, maybe not in a supplement form yet, but this whole idea of what will happen to my body if I take creatine, you are ingesting creatine. So let's just get that out of the way. When you get it through your diet, it's in relatively small amounts, 1 gram or 2 per day. Mostly under 1 gram for a lot of people. Athletes have started supplementing with creatine. It's been around for a long time, and why they are supplementing with this we'll get into, but it does help with physical performance, recovery, and cognitive function. We'll get into why. Creatine for athletic performance. Why would somebody take creatine? When you consume creatine through dietary source or supplement, it enters your bloodstream and is transported to your skeletal muscle tissue, your brain, and other organs. Once inside your muscle cells in particular, creatine combines with phosphate molecule to form phosphocreatine. It's really important to know for this podcast, when you ingest creatine, it's gonna form phosphocreatine. During high intensity exercise, we're talking weightlifting, we're talking playing sports, we're talking sprinting, ATP, which is the energy of your cells. So ATP is really critical to know. This is how your body produces energy. It's really crucial to know the system. ATP is stored in your muscles and is utilized to provide energy for muscle contractions. And this doesn't just mean when your muscles like contracting, it means when your muscles just moving, when you're doing anything, when you're walking, when you're sprinting. As ATP is broken down, it loses one of those phosphate groups and becomes adenosine diphosphate, ADP. So ATP breaks down into ADP. And at this point, the muscle cells need to regenerate ATP to sustain continued muscle contraction. So if you want to simplify this, to sustain energy, you need ATP. It breaks down into ADP. If you want to be a good athlete, you want to crush your workouts, you need that recycling to be optimized. So if a cell needs to spend energy to accomplish a task, the ATP molecule splits off into its 3 phosphates, becoming ADP, as we just talked about. The energy holding that phosphate molecule is now released and available to do work in the cell. When a cell has extra energy gained from breaking down food or, assisted with supplementing with creatine, it can turn back that ADP into ATP. The ATP molecule it's just like a rechargeable battery. It's a really good way to think about it. When it's fully charged, it's ATP. When it's a bit run down, when your iPhone battery is low, it's ADP, if you want to simplify it. However, the battery is not just going to disappear and completely die. It's going to get charged back up again through, you get energy, you get food, you get calories, you get creatine maybe. And here's where supplementing with creatine comes into play. Phosphocreatine, so once you take creatine, it's broken down into phosphocreatine. It serves as a readily available source of high energy phosphate groups. So the enzyme creatine kinase facilitates the transfer of this phosphate group from phosphocreatine to ADP, regenerating it back into ATP. This process is known as the creatine phosphate system or the ATP PCR system. So basically there's a system that your body uses when you supplement with creatine to help this regeneration of ADP to ATP, which is you need that when you're lifting weights, when you're sprinting, when you're doing any type of sport. And now we're finding when your body's just functioning in general. You don't need to be some elite athlete to benefit from creatine. Your brain is, basically trying to crank out energy when you're thinking, when you're doing a hard task. So right now, my body's using creatine to form energy. That energy is being used to, do a cognitive task at this point, but when I go work out later, that same system is going to be used. So this is why supplementing creatine is very important. The ATP PCR system appears to be especially important when you're doing short bursts of energy or high intense activities, like really intensive stuff, weightlifting, as we discussed. These activities really rely on the rapid breakdown of ATP to provide that necessary energy for muscle contractions. And the ATP stores in your muscles can be quickly depleted. And this is why supplementing with creatine will increase the concentration of phosphocreatine in the muscles, so saturation of more phosphocreatine. When there's more phosphocreatine available from creatine supplementation, the muscle cells can rapidly regenerate ATP in just a way more efficient and better way than without phosphocreatine. So during intense exercise, this enables your muscles to sustain higher power outputs for longer amounts of time. And it also allows for the quick turnaround of ADP, which we don't want, turned into ATP for the necessary energy of muscle contractions. So this is very crucial. If you want to have better energy in the gym, if you want to lift weights better, and for, if you're doing like high intensity training and you want to really like crank out more reps and sets, creatine is going to be important. So supplementing with it. Let's get into some of the other benefits of creatine. We now know that creatine is essential not just for your muscle health, but for your brain health. It's also essential for other organs as well. There's not as much research with creatine with your liver function, skin function, but these are organs of the body. If your skin is trying to repair something, those same energy systems are in play here. Let's get into some of the studies on creatine for cognitive function. We now know through this, creatine supplementation facilitates a more constant regeneration of ATP in your whole body, including your brain. So this enhances the ability to do cognitive tasks. There's a 2010 study showing a 16% reduction in the blood oxygen level dependent amplitude after supplementing for a group of young healthy adults with creatine. This was complemented by various performance increases on cognitive tests. So we also know that creatine can help potentially stave off Alzheimer's. So if you're taking creatine and you're wondering, oh, should I take it on my off days, stuff like that? Yes, you do want to take creatine on your off days. I'm taking 5 grams of creatine every single day. Why do that isn't just for the muscles, as we talked about some of the benefits there, it's also for your brain health. Now we get into the forms. This has been a big thing I've seen on TikTok. And running a supplement company, I know a lot about this specific topic. Creatine monohydrate is the superior form. It's also one of the most affordable forms. That sometimes doesn't happen in the supplement world. We look at magnesium, we see magnesium glycinate, magnesium L-threonate being the best forms of magnesium, and they are a bit more pricey. We're just in a sort of lucky state, I guess, with creatine, where creatine monohydrate is the best form to supplement with. I would release a more expensive form of creatine if it were better. If creatine HCl were better, I would release that. I wouldn't care if it was a bit more expensive. It's not. Creatine monohydrate is what I take, and I'll tell you why. First of all, it's just the most extensively studied form of creatine. It's one of the most studied form of dietary supplements ever. It's been pretty extensively studied since the 1980s and has shown efficacy, safety, and it's also a low cost. And then because of that, there's all these other forms of creatine which people want to study. Creatine HCl, creatine salts, creatine dipeptides, and there's a lot of claims I've seen about these forms of creatine that it causes less bloating. People will say this creatine, is just way more bioavailable. There are no, and I repeat, no studies to prove that whatsoever, and we're talking one of the most studied supplements ever. So also when you get into like buffered forms of creatine and stuff like that, they'll say, oh, it's like, more friendly on the gut. Again, no studies to show that whatsoever. Creatine monohydrate is really what you want to go to. A lot of these other forms of creatine actually will contain less creatine per gram than creatine monohydrate. So creatine monohydrate is, 99% creatine monohydrate. And when that's absorbed into your blood and taken up into muscles, it's just the most effective form of creatine. You don't need creatine HCl is basically the point of this. You don't need a buffered form of creatine or anything like that. Now there is some issues with purity of creatine. So creatine, like any supplement, is made in various, labs in the United States, in China, in, India, and wherever. So this is a pretty key thing, and I will say that creatine monohydrate is a pretty safe supplement. When we make a creatine supplement, so how we make our creatine monohydrate is we will contact maybe 40 or 50 sources and we will get samples of them, and we will then lab test those samples. And I will say some of them did come back with heavy metals. What I will say is that creatine monohydrate was generally safe. We had a good, 25, 30 sources that we wanted to go with for this. It's a pretty safe supplement overall. There are other supplements where we send samples out for lab testing and you're like, wow, like 8 out of 10 of these came back with heavy metals or pesticides, something that we don't want in there. Creatine monohydrate overall is a pretty good source. You can kind of get any good creatine monohydrate if you like it. The issue with some creatines is there can be a concentration of heavy metals. We're talking mercury, we're talking lead, and this is usually due to the different storage methods that these companies use, how they're shipped, and how they actually make them. But yeah, you just want to go with a brand that you trust, and ours is lab tested for heavy metals. I think that is a key differentiator. So another myth about creatine. Let's dive into creatine and baldness. This is one of the most common questions I get. Brennan, I don't want to take creatine because I heard it makes you go bald. How did this myth even start? Is there any truth to it whatsoever? So the speculation between the connection of creatine and hair loss or baldness stems from one single study, and the study was out of Australia. It was college rugby players supplementing with 25 grams of creatine for 7 days, followed by 5 grams for 14 days. And they experienced a slight increase in DHT or dihydrotestosterone, which is correlated with male pattern baldness. DHT doesn't cause male pattern baldness. What does this mean? There are people with very high DHT who have no baldness whatsoever. There are people with low DHT that have baldness, but overall they say that people with higher DHT are more prone to go bald. So this got people really worried, saying, oh my God, look at this study, their DHT went up. DHT will go up when you exercise. You can just, if you want to Google that, go ahead. DHT exercise, it makes your DHT go up. In this study, what I believe happened was they just embarked on a training program. That's why they were taking creatine. So their DHT went up. It does not mean that creatine makes your DHT go up, and it also doesn't mean, of course, that creatine or high DHT will make you go bald. So does creatine make your hair fall out? No. To date, there have been 12 other studies specifically investigating creatine supplementation with testosterone and DHT, and they show no connection between increased DHT and creatine. So I would really question when you see somebody say creatine is going to make you go bald. It's bullshit. It's complete BS, and I just covered why. The next thing you hear a lot is kidney damage. There's a common belief somehow that creatine is going to cause kidney damage, and where did this stem from? So this belief came from some misconceptions from a study in 1998, and there's 20 years of research past that have consistently shown that creatine does not negatively affect kidney health in any way. How did this happen? Well, in 1998, there was one person in a study that had pre-existing kidney damage and was taking an immunosuppressant medication, and they did a study with creatine, and this person was in the study, and obviously there were some kidney issues with this person. And this went on to create this myth somehow that creatine damages your kidneys. It's complete bullshit. There have been multiple clinical trials since then and many peer-reviewed trials that just don't support this claim whatsoever, and there is a lot of research on people taking creatine, not having any kidney issues. And also when you look at the mechanism of action with phosphocreatine, it doesn't really make sense that it would damage your kidneys. If you're a healthy individual, I would not worry about creatine damaging your kidneys at all. Even if you're going to take more than 5 grams per day, and we'll get into dosage, I wouldn't worry about that at all whatsoever. So those are two main myths right there. Let me know in the comments if there's any other myths or questions you have about creatine. So now we'll get into a big myth that we also hear, creatine and bloating. Brennan, I don't take creatine because it makes my muscles fill up with water, my face gets bloated and puffy. It's all water weight. You hear that a lot. Oh, you're taking creatine, but it's all water weight. It's going to go away. It's just water in your muscles. This is the dumbest thing you'll ever hear people say, because your muscles are largely 70% water. When you are exercising, when you are gaining muscle, there is water being driven into your muscle cell. This is just how you build muscle, how you function, and you're not going to lose those gains if you stop taking creatine. Creatine will not cause bloating. It drives water into the muscle cell. This is not a bad thing whatsoever. This is a good thing. It's not going to make your face fat and bloated. You do want to stay hydrated when you're on creatine, but that's just because you're driving a bit more water into the muscle cell, which isn't a bad thing at all whatsoever. If you were just hitting a really good workout program with good diet, nutrition, and hydration, you would be driving more water into the muscle cell. So this whole idea that creatine causes bloating is just false. Also, people will say it dehydrates you. That's not necessarily true. Your body is just sort of functioning better and driving more water into the muscle cell. And you're probably exercising too if you're taking creatine, hopefully. Stay hydrated. You don't need to drink some insane amount of water. You just need to stay hydrated, follow your thirst mechanism, use some good electrolytes, and you'll be good. And then we get into, do you need a loading phase with creatine? Do you need to take, 20 to 25 grams per day and then taper down to 5 grams per day? Well, there are some studies showing that, hey, this will increase your creatine stores. Lower doses of 3 to 5 grams per day are also just as effective for improving muscle mass and muscle saturation levels. It might take you a tiny bit longer to saturate your muscles with creatine, but this is a way better protocol, in my opinion, than this loading phase. Taking 3 to 5 grams, maybe if you're really big, you can take 6, 7 grams per day. If you're doing some crazy weightlifting, I think that's totally fine. I just take a loaded up scoop of this, so it's probably 5 to 6 grams, what I do every single day. So you do not need to do a loading phase whatsoever because creatine, it's just gonna work by saturating your muscles. When we get into timing of creatine on when you want to take creatine, there is not a big difference whatsoever in the timing of creatine. There are small differences. If you really want to optimize, you could take it post-workout with carbs, so with your post-workout meal, you could take creatine. I sometimes do that. Oftentimes, guys, I just put it in my protein shake in the morning or put it in my water in the morning so I don't have to worry about it. You're better off just getting 5 grams per day consistently than worrying so much about the timing or taking it at a time where you're actually prone to maybe missing the creatine dosage or forgetting about it. So I just take it when I take most of my supplements. It's pretty easy for me to do that. There's not a big difference on when you take it. You're talking, a couple % gain when you take it, post-workout with carbs. It's not gonna matter too much. The point is, guys, we make these creatine capsules and we make creatine powder. You can look it up on Santa Cruz Paleo. Take your creatine. Obviously, I want you to use my brand. We make one of the best priced creatines on the market. Capsules or powder really doesn't matter as long as the only ingredient is creatine monohydrate. 5 grams per day is what I do. You could take probably 3 to 6 grams per day is a very safe place to be at. Obviously, consult with your doctor and all that good stuff, but creatine is one of the safest supplements you can take, and I've seen a huge benefit, and I notice when I don't take my creatine. And it's just one of those things that just is gonna give you more power in the gym. It's gonna enhance your cognitive function, and in my opinion, it's really gonna enhance your gut health, your skin health, because these are organs in our body that need energy, and you're helping that system. There's a lot of myths about it. I know a lot of people DM me, say, hey, my parents won't let me take creatine. For some reason, it just really scared that generation. Maybe because it's like a white powder of some sort. I don't know. Get the capsules and just, try to take it. So we've covered creatine, and now we're gonna get into protein powder. So we're gonna talk about some of the benefits of protein powder and why you might want to include it. Protein powder in athletes, we're gonna look at muscle recovery and growth. After intense exercise or resistance training, you work out, you go to practice, whatever, the body is gonna undergo a process called muscle protein breakdown. It's pretty simple. Your muscle protein is gonna break down. To support muscle growth and recovery, it's important to counterbalance this breakdown with muscle protein synthesis, where new muscle proteins are synthesized, and this is where food and protein come into play. Protein powder supplements, particularly those rich in essential amino acids, which pretty much every main source of protein powder, even collagen, is really rich in EAAs, essential amino acids. Those are gonna help stimulate muscle protein synthesis a bit more effectively than other protein sources. Now, am I saying that protein powder is better than real food? No, not at all. Because real food's gonna have a bunch of other benefits that protein powder sort of doesn't have, and you should be basing your diet around real whole foods, and protein powder should be in addition to your diet. However, essential amino acids are the building blocks of protein, and they play a crucial role in muscle repair and growth. Whey protein, for example, is a fast-digesting protein source that contains a high proportion of essential amino acids, making it very effective in promoting muscle protein synthesis. Also, beef isolate protein, which has a really good amino acid profile. Now, it doesn't have all the amino acids that whey has, and we'll get into some studies about that if that's even crucial. Spoiler alert, unless you're gonna try to live off protein powder, it's not crucial. So just find a good protein that you like. But basically, after exercise and even before exercise, taking a protein powder is gonna help muscle protein synthesis, just pure protein for your body to absorb and go to the repair of your muscle tissue that's basically been broken down through sports, through exercise. And yeah, so let's get into some of the forms of protein real quick. We have collagen protein, which has become very popular, and I want to sort of clarify some stuff about collagen protein. So it is the most abundant protein in the body. It's a fiber-like structure, and it's used to make connective tissue as well. Like the name implies, this type of tissue connects other tissues and is a major component of bone, skin, muscles, tendons, and cartilage. It helps to really make your tissue strong and resilient and to be able to withstand stretch, and it also is going to help support muscle growth. Why collagen sometimes gets a bad rap is because it doesn't have all of the essential amino acids. So if you just tried to live off collagen, probably take a long time, but you would eventually start to break down because you don't have all those essential amino acids. Now, when you're supplementing with collagen, maybe you take collagen in the morning, you're going to eat food, which is going to contain all the other amino acids, so you're going to have a complete protein with that collagen. So for everybody listening to this, it's not a problem when you hear somebody say, oh, it doesn't have all the essential amino acids. It's not really a problem unless you're trying to survive off it. So when we get into beef isolate protein is rich in those collagen peptides that I just discussed, but it has a more robust amino acid profile because it's not collagen. It's more of like a full protein. So when we get into the comparison of beef isolate and whey protein, there is actually a really good study on this where they gave 30 college age males beef isolate protein or whey isolate protein, and they did weight training 5 days per week and some cardio, 3 resistance training days, 2 cardio days. And they did a bunch of measurements on them, including 1 rep max on the bench press. They did a squat, test of and they compared lean body mass. There was no difference between the whey and the beef isolate group, so they both gained, lean body mass. However, in the group, there was a group not supplementing with any protein, so no beef isolate, no whey protein, and the whey isolate group and the beef isolate group crushed the no protein supplementing group. And that group was still eating real food. So I think this is really interesting because it's like, okay, should you supplement with protein? Is there really going to be a benefit here? Probably. And then we get into whey and casein protein. Whey protein is the protein extracted from whey. It's the watery portion of milk that separates from the curds when you're making cheese. This has caused some people to say it's like a waste product. It's not. It's protein, So I don't really get why people say that. Casein protein, similar to whey, is derived from milk, but the biggest difference between them is that casein protein is absorbed at a way slower rate than whey is, and it also contains much more lactose. Whey protein isolate almost contains no lactose. If you can eat butter without getting like a dairy flare-up or indigestion, you can absolutely have whey protein. Whey protein concentrate is going to have more dairy in it basically than whey protein isolate because it's an isolated whey. So I have never met anybody who has issues with dairy and has an issue with whey protein isolate. We're going to get into why so many people have issues with whey protein. But yeah, casein protein definitely does have more milk sugars in it. So if you don't do well with dairy, I really wouldn't recommend casein. And I'm really just not a big fan of casein overall. If you like it and it works for you, that's cool. The whole idea of taking casein protein at night because it's slower absorbing is kind of bullshit. I looked at a bunch of studies on that. If you want to drink whey protein at night, you're fine. You don't need that. You don't always need to have protein in your body, okay? Like that's not really accurate. If you're just trying to gain a lot of muscle and dial it in, you can have a protein-rich meal at dinner and then you can wake up and have protein. There's not like some gap when you're asleep where if you don't have slow digesting protein, you're going to be just losing muscle. It doesn't work like that. And in that same vein, we get into the anabolic window. The anabolic window is definitely something I used to believe in because there are some studies showing, oh, these people supplemented with protein and carbs after a workout and it led to, more muscle growth. And you're like, okay, like this makes sense. I feel depleted after my workout. I'm sometimes hungry. I need to hit this anabolic window, which is turns out to be just a myth. It's commonly recommended to consume protein as soon as possible after exercise, but there's just a lack of strong scientific evidence to support this practice. One study showed that a supplement containing protein, carbohydrates, and fat immediately after exercise increased protein synthesis instead of delaying it 3 hours. However, this study was focused on moderate intensity aerobic exercise, so you're talking like cardio, and that increased protein synthesis was likely related to the specific protein fractions rather than overall muscle synthesis. Other studies, just like that one, have shown conflicting results in regards to timing of protein ingestion after exercise, and so it's just sort of been really questioned. There's also some studies showing that when you don't eat for an hour or 2 or sometimes 3 or 4 after you work out, you get a nice natural spike of human growth hormone, which could provide some benefits as well. So when thinking about the anabolic window, after your workout, if you're hungry and you're feeling good and you want to eat, I'd say go for it. And I would do a post-workout meal, especially if you're just trying to put on muscle. You don't need to be in some panic to like be sipping your protein shake as soon as you leave the gym. There's nothing wrong with that. but you don't need to be in some panic. You're not going to lose all your gains if you don't eat protein like as you're leaving the gym. So the anabolic window is definitely not proven, and yeah, that's just, you don't need to worry about that. Now we get into which protein powder should you choose. So maybe you're listening to all this and you're like, okay, I get it, Brendan. I want to take a protein powder, obviously. And the big reason people want to take a protein powder is you do want to hit this 1 gram per pound of body weight, per target goal of body weight. Let me say that. So right now I weigh 165 pounds. I want to weigh 170 all muscle. I want to eat about 170 grams of protein per day. What's really going to help me get there is taking this protein powder, blending it up in a blender, and drinking it, because then I can just knock out so quick 40 grams of protein with 2 scoops of this, and I've just checked 40 grams of protein off of my list for the day. It's absolutely crucial, and it's portable, and it's just amazing. So then we get into, people say, Brennan, I take whey protein and I just don't feel good. I get skin reactions, and I experience this as well. And we look deep into whey protein, beef isolate protein, the different types of protein. I think the big thing with whey is that when you look at the ingredients in 99% of whey proteins on the shelves, there are artificial sweeteners, there are thickening agents, there are preservatives, there are food dyes, there are horrible ingredients. Gums like carrageenan and guar gum, which I've talked about before, anti-caking agents to make the protein mix really well in water, because a lot of these companies want you to have a great consumer experience where you take a scoop of their protein, you put it in your water shaker, and it just starts dissolving in. You go, I barely have to shake this thing. That is not natural whatsoever. Think of protein in nature: meat, fish, eggs. Proteins aren't meant to just be, oh, you just gently mix them into water and they dissolve. They do that by adding a bunch of additives into your protein, anti-caking agents in particular. I do not think those things are good for human health, and I think consumers are wanting something a bit different. This beef isolate protein powder, if you've tried it, there's no anti-caking agents in there whatsoever. And this was a big debate we sort of had, like, hey, the protein doesn't blend in well. When we mix it in water, it's going to cake up a little bit. I just decided, hey, that's how protein is. You have to blend this up, or you really have to shake it up, and there might be a little bit sticking to your protein shaker. I am pretty sure consumers want good gut health, good skin health, and a protein that doesn't wreck their insides. So that's why I went with that, and it's pretty unique actually to find. So now we're gonna get into the gut and protein powder. You have your gut health, which is your gut microbiome. This is crucial for your digestion, your skin health, if you wanna look up the gut-skin axis, and pretty much the health of your whole body. This is where a lot of your neurotransmitters are produced, and it's really the next frontier of health is gut health and gut microbiome. A lot of these protein powders are filled with binders, artificial sweeteners, anti-caking agents, which in my opinion do not support a healthy gut environment. And we have some good research on what guar gum does to the gut, and it's not good. We have good research on what some of these anti-caking agents do to the gut. It's not good. As far as artificial sweeteners go, we have some studies showing negative effects, and I think we will see more and more that come out with artificial sweeteners. And a lot of these substances basically act as fermentable substrates for gut bacteria, which sometimes we don't want. They can lead to an overgrowth of certain bad bacteria and basically disrupting your gut microbiome. A lot of these non-caloric artificial sweeteners are very common. You'll see them as sucralose, acesulfame, potassium, aspartame in your protein powders. And we really just, in my opinion, want to limit those. I just don't see a really good benefit to those, especially when there are completely natural sweeteners like stevia leaf extract and monk fruit extract, or you can go with the all natural version, which doesn't have any sweeteners. That's probably going to be a better option and a safer way to hedge your bets. And a big issue, which you'll see in your protein powder if you go grab, if you have a normal brand, maltodextrin, guar gum, silicon dioxide, titanium dioxide. Why they put these in there is just for texture. So sometimes it's a thickening agent, sometimes it's an anti-caking agent, so it doesn't clump up at all when you mix it with water. And this is just not a really good thing to have in your body. When we look at maltodextrin in particular, it's a common filler and thickening agent. And recent studies have found that maltodextrin can negatively affect your gut in multiple ways. It's been linked to the development of necroticizing enterocolitis, also known as NEC, which is a severe intestinal disorder. So that's just not good whatsoever. There have been some animal models also showing this. So we see sort of a trend there with maltodextrin. And it's basically just like a corn sugar. So it's going to be made from GMO corn. And I would just personally avoid all that type of shit in your protein powder. And when we go on to some other common additives in protein powder, we see polysorbate 80 as a preservative. There's some animal studies showing polysorbate 80 disrupting the gut bacteria and leading to several health problems. and I just think it's a horrible ingredient to have in your protein powder. When we get into silicon dioxide and titanium dioxide, a lot of those substances can cross your blood-brain barrier. Titanium dioxide right now, you might remember, is under investigation basically to potentially ban Skittles. And you can look up titanium dioxide Skittles, why they're potentially banning titanium dioxide in Skittles. And then we get into pea protein and vegan proteins and vegetarian proteins. I think you're expecting me to say that never ingest those ever, that's the end of the world. I'm not really a fan of pea protein whatsoever just because of the process used to make it, and I wonder how much of the lectins they're really getting out of that. You would never want to ingest raw peas, for example. Oxalates, lectins, other gut disrupting compounds. Same thing with soy protein. However, honestly, I'm going to tell you, if you really enjoy those and you're loving them and you're crushing your goals and you feel good when you ingest them, go for it. I'm not going to tell you to stop using those. The types of proteins that I like are grass-fed, grass-finished beef isolate protein and grass-fed, grass-finished whey isolate. And I try to find ones, I mean, we have our own brand, but if you're looking for one, minimal ingredients is what you're going to want to go for. There shouldn't be a 14-page ingredient list on your protein powder. There shouldn't even be, 14 ingredients. It should be very simple. So with our grass-fed, grass-finished beef isolate protein, because of the collagen peptides in here, along with the protein, this is going to nourish your gut, skin, hair, and muscles. It's something I like to blend in. Sometimes I'll do almond milk, sometimes I'll do raw dairy. Throw a banana in there, maybe an egg yolk. That's a really good protein shake. We're going to come out with the whey isolate. It might be about 2 months from now, maybe 45 days. And that's going to also be a very simple ingredient, grass-fed, grass-finished, Irish whey isolate from A2 cows. So we're really dialing in this whey. I'm so excited for it. We spent a long time formulating it, and it's also going to have a very simple ingredient roster and just delicious. We're going to do chocolate and vanilla with the whey. So I'm not against whey protein, and I'm a big fan of beef isolate protein. I think collagen protein is great as long as you're eating enough food to really get all your essential amino acids. And all that said, of course, I sell protein powders and I sell creatine. Real food is the first thing. If you don't have your diet dialed in, if you're not getting protein through, eggs, fish, meat, if you're not getting some creatine through eggs, fish, meat, dial that in first. Don't just go towards a protein powder and creatine if you don't have other stuff in your life dialed in. But I hope this podcast covered some of the myths about creatine and protein powder. There's some bullshit, just myths about them. And we see a lot of this, for some reason, the older generation, like my parents' generation, they just became anti-powder somehow. Or if you're taking a powder, it could be dangerous. And it's just bullshit, It's creatine, It's the same thing, in a chemical structure that's in food. Protein powder, you have amino acids here. It's the same thing that's in food. So watch out for those additives in protein powder. Watch out for the additives in creatine. Get something that just says creatine monohydrate. If you want to try out our brand, type in Santa Cruz Paleo into Amazon or go to santacruzpaleo.com. Use the code SantaCruz10. Get some creatine. Get some protein powder. You will see gains. It's not going to damage your kidneys. It's not going to make your hair fall out, all that bullshit. Take it for a little while. See how you notice the gains and performance in your sport and enjoy. Let me know what topics you want to see me dive deep into. I hope this helped you, and I appreciate you guys. I'll check in with you soon with another deep dive into some topics. Later.